Thanks be to God indeed. Friends, some days are tougher than others. And I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but for me, there are some days when I just don't want to even get out of bed. There are other days that the schedule is so jam-packed that it seems that there's no way that I'll be able to get everything done. Right? You've been there? Some days it just seems that the walls are closing in on all sides, and there seems to be no way out of that. You've got to struggle to get through, right? We all struggle in life. Some of us struggle more than others. But I found that through our struggles, friends, we are strengthened and our eyes are opened in some new possibilities. And we eventually find that without Christ, our struggles are in vain. And in the big scheme of things, we can accomplish very little without His guiding presence in our life. Today's gospel lesson from John, it's familiar to most of us. It's the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, and we know that story, right? If not the details, then at the very least we've heard of this event, right? Jesus feeding the 5,000. Jesus is there on the hillside with His disciples. A large crowd's gathered around to hear Him. The disciples are wondering how they're going to feed all of these people. And Andrew finds a little boy who has lunch with him. 5 loaves and 2 fish. And through the power of Christ, the loaves and the fish are multiplied so that everybody is fed. And we know that story. It's a story of one of the greatest miracles of Christ, right? But what we often overlook is this inward struggle that Jesus and the disciples were facing on that day. They struggled. We often overlook the reason that Jesus was in that place. And we forget the motivations of the large crowd that had gathered there. In verse 1, the writer of John, he tells us that Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee from where He had been preaching and healing people. He went to the other side of the lake not to find more people to heal or to find a better place to preach. He went to the other side of the lake instead to escape the crowds that were gathering around Him. Jesus went over to the other side of the sea with His disciples to find a quiet spot. A spot where He could refocus, where He could pray. But the crowd found Him. And Jesus couldn't send them away. Feeding the crowd, that didn't help the situation. We're told that Jesus sensed that the crowd was now about to come and to take Him by force and make Him their king. The crowd expecting that Jesus would be the political leader to lead them in their struggles against the empire, pressed in further upon Him, and Jesus once again withdrew. This time He withdrew further up the mountain so that He could be alone. Have you ever been there? You know, when you struggle just to get that little quiet time and something interrupts that. That's what Jesus was trying to do. He's trying to recharge His batteries, if you will. He's trying to find some quiet time. And after all of this, presumably after most of the crowd had left, right? The disciples left Jesus there in that quiet solitude of the mountain. We're not told why. Maybe they didn't know where He went. But they left. They got in a boat and they began to row back over to the other shore where they had come from. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a rowboat before. But a few summers ago, I had the opportunity to attempt to teach a number of 9 and 10-year-old Cub Scouts how to row a boat. And although the lake was somewhat calm, it was a struggle to make the boat go where you wanted it to go. And because in a rowboat, you row backwards. You row backwards. Your back faces the front of the boat, and so you have to rely on the others in the boat to help guide you where you're going. And let me tell you, for this person who likes to be in control of everything, that's a struggle, especially whenever you're trying to take advice left or right from 9 and 10-year-olds. Not a good thing. Another thing about rowboats is that when the wind begins to blow, the rowing gets more difficult. And so after a little while, your arms begin to tire, they begin to burn, and what seemed like an easy little jaunt, it becomes a big struggle. Because you're pulling this way against the wind and this way. And as John picks up this story, the disciples were having a difficult time there on the water. A storm had come up. A strong wind was blowing out against them. And it seemed as though they were going nowhere in this. And as they struggled long into the night, they looked out across the sea and they saw Jesus coming toward them. You might think this wouldn't come as a shock to them, right? They saw what Jesus could do. Right? Just a few hours before, they saw that Jesus had fed more than 5,000 people with a little boy's lunch. But even having witnessed that power, John tells us that they were terrified. They were terrified, and sensing their fear, Jesus spoke to them, and when they believed, when they accepted Christ's calming words, immediately, the Scripture says, their struggle ceased. And not only that, they reached their destination. You ever felt that way where you just struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle? And when you just give it all up, you find that you're there. Yeah, I believe this story has a lot to tell us about the struggles that we experience in life and how we're able to, through God's grace, to continue. We all struggle in life. Some of us struggle with having enough energy to get out of bed in the morning, trying to overcome financial burdens or making decisions about medical care of loved ones or ourselves. Others are struggling with an addiction or trying to deal with coworkers who frustrate you to the point of exhaustion. Maybe you're struggling to communicate with your spouse, your kids, your parents. Maybe you're struggling with something so deep that your stomach is just tied in knots and you don't know why. Where do you turn for help in that? Or are you so caught up in your own struggle that you attempt to move beyond your struggles just by yourself? Do you turn to a friend? Do you attempt to escape life's problems by drowning yourself in idols of your own making, like alcohol or drugs or work? Whatever it might be. My friends, hear this. In His humanity, even Jesus struggled. He struggled to find quiet amidst that pressing crowd. He struggled in frustration at His disciples' misunderstanding. He struggled with the religious leaders who were seeking His life. He struggled in prayer. That night in the garden before He was crucified, he sought the inner strength that only the love of God could provide. Life is full of struggles. Some are more difficult than others. Some are overcome in time, and others seem to remain with us every day. One of the most difficult struggles that I faced in my life was the struggle with my call to ministry. As some of you may know, that when I was about 13 years old, I felt that God was calling me into ministry, and I absolutely rejected that. At age 13, it seemed that the possibilities in life were endless, right? In the mix of raging hormones and trying to fit in with other teens, I was not willing to give up control over the dreams and the goals that I had set for my life. And when someone asked me what I was going to do when I grew up, I had all of that figured out. I was going to do the best in school. I was going to go to college. I was going to be an engineer. I was going to... Every statement, friends, was an I statement. I was in control. And later on in life, when all of my plans seemed to be falling apart, my struggle with God, that came to the surface again. At college, I struggled alone with God. And my grades plummeted. I wasn't attending church. People I called friends abandoned me. My life seemed to be an absolute mess. And I was angry with God. And I kept asking God why He had let me get this far, just to dash my hopes and my dreams, right? I blamed God for abandoning me, for not pushing me in the right direction, for failing me. And in my struggle, in my brokenness, God came to me. He pulled me up out of that pit, and God was now in my struggle. God was in my struggle. I didn't recognize that. See, like the disciples, I had witnessed the healing power of God. But I refused to accept the notion that I was not in control of my life. Instead, I made new plans, right? Plans would lead to further struggles until God finally opened the door to my heart once again and I accepted His call. That's a struggle. It's a struggle to give over control of your life to God. It's a struggle to recognize how God is even moving in your life. In an ideal world, I'd tell you today that all the struggles in my life were over then. No, not true. Not true. I tell you that all of those burdens, right, were lifted suddenly from me. Not true. But here's the thing. I know when I struggle, I know that God is in the midst of that. And I can recognize that. I know that when I try to be in control of my life, then I'm focusing too much on myself rather than on following what God is calling me to do. See, accepting God's call has brought with it challenges, struggles beyond what I could have imagined. But by the grace of God, I don't have to do that alone. I fully believe that God brought my wife Lucy into my life. She's been a blessing. What you may not know is that Lucy is she's the one that keeps me focused on God. She's the one who prays for me, reminds me that in all of life's struggles, right, God is there. She reminds me that it's in the struggles that we're strengthened. One of the opportunities that I've had as a pastor is to attend a few open AA meetings, right? And I want you to know that the testimonies given are nothing but struggles. It's in the struggles that we are truly formed, friends. It's in the overcoming of life's obstacles with God's help that we are strengthened both physically and spiritually. It's in the struggles that we come to recognize our own limitations. The extraordinary grace of God. Through my personal struggles, I found, like the disciples, that it's better to let Jesus into the boat than to use all of your strength fighting a powerful wind. And I know that without Christ in our lives, we all struggle in vain. And I pray that you're going to allow Christ to come into your life as well. That you're going to find the strength through Him in the midst of life's difficult struggles. And that your eyes are going to be open to some new possibilities. A whole bunch of possibilities that He's going to set before you. And friends, I pray that if you're in the midst of struggle right now, that you'll open your hearts. And you're going to receive openly that grace that God gives you. My friends, if you find yourself struggling in life, I urge you to seek the comfort, the strength that God can provide. You know, each AA meeting, it ends in the same familiar way with a prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr. A prayer that's printed, and you can read this in all sorts of different places. Yeah, maybe you've never taken the time to hear this prayer for what it is. But it's one that I cling to. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. The disciples needed just a prayer like that. The day that they struggled against that wind, they found that they were accomplishing very little without Jesus. They had gone off, they had left Him up the mountain rather than remaining close to Him. And when they saw Him walking towards them, they were terrified. They were terrified. Friends, maybe that's how you feel as well. Maybe you're terrified. Maybe it's been some time since you felt close to Jesus. Maybe you've struggled for so long on your own that you've closed yourself off to the possibility that Jesus can help you overcome those obstacles that you face in life. Maybe you've never really opened your heart to receive the free gift of God's grace through the love of Jesus Christ. Friends, now's the time to do that. I give God thanks for the witness that we've had this morning. When Vida came up here and opened his heart to receive the grace, the wonderful grace that God offers. Friends, that's a testimony to us. If you're struggling in life, open your heart. Because you can accomplish very little, friends. Very little. Without the grace of God through Jesus Christ.